All right. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing today? I'm doing well. Welcome to my first television review. So, I hope you can forgive the format as I don't know how to edit. So, this is as best as I can do right now. And yeah, so today we are reviewing Stargirl. I watched the CW version first, and then I watched the DC universe. So I can tell you that things like small scenes that kind of help with the pacing are cut from the CW version to fit our timeline. The DC Universe version does have extended scenes or extra scenes that help with the pacing, make it feel a lot better. So if you have access to DC Universe, that is the superior version. So I would recommend checking that one out first. Although the removal of these scenes did not ruin my overall experience with this episode, it's just kind of like adding some sugar or whipped cream onto an ice cream. So it's like every time I wanted something small to happen in the CW version, uh, it did actually happen in the DC version. So that was quite nice. So the story kicks off with some text on the screen. The golden age of heroes protected the world for decades. 10 years ago, the golden age ended. And we cut into our first scene where you can see characters like Hourman, Sandman, Jay Garrick's helmet on the floor. We open on Christmas, where we start an action scene where the JSA is losing. Their headquarters is wrecked. Wildcat is the first we actually see as he's thrown out, and this starts some weird dialogue with Pat where he just starts randomly naming everyone as he passes them. This, of course, is for the audience who may want to look up the Wikipedia on some of these characters at some point, although that's not your average audience. So it is a little weird and out of place, but that's not so bad in my opinion. It's just awkward. We then see their Hourman, who I have on screen as well, followed by Dr. Midnight, who's just fighting someone up on the rafters before being kicked down, and that's when we see Starman, played by Joel McHale from Community, and he joins the fight, starts pushing around some guys, but he's soundly defeated and overpowered by the combined might of the ice villain. His name already slipped my mind. I'm sorry. And they have to make their escape. Pat Stripe C has to pick Starman up, and they make their way out. And of course, this is where you pass the Flash helmet and Sandman, who are just on the floor motionless. Um, as they make their escape, I am mildly invested in the show at this point, but you get a glimpse. They then do a scene with Solomon Grundy is let loose on the heroes, but they are able to escape via a transforming rocket car. So the car just transforms and they take off, which I liked because it's just like the little wink wink nudge nudge to superhero comics that you are allowed to be a bit more goofy in these types of shows. I don't see why everyone tries to make them so realistic. But then we get a scene where they essentially do the same joke 3 times in a row, and I had to roll my eyes a bit at that moment because it's just, well, okay, we got it after two. And I felt that this was where the show might have lost me, but they brought me back with a scene that was brief, but it did catch me in the feels a little bit. Starman dies, but his last words to Pat are, "You are a good friend." So it brought me back to the show's world, and I was able to carry on without any problems. Um, Although the feeling of investment is lost again in the next scene, where we cut to a young Courtney's house during Christmas, and the child actor is just staring off emotionless into space. Uh, I can't really fault her for not being able to completely emote and act the scene out, but it was just disturbing how she was unblinking, emotionless, and just staring out into space, which I found unsettling. But after this brief scene with young Courtney, we cut to present day, where everything is being moved around. They are moving. We get some exposition that they are recently married. Courtney's mother and Pat, who was previously Stripesy. And we learn that they are moving to Nebraska. So that's quite nice. I did like the name of the moving company, American Action Movers. It even had the Action Comics type of font. We'll call it font. We see that this gift she was holding in her brief scene at the beginning is still in her possession. It's still unopened. It was for her father, but of course she never was able to give it to him, so she's just been taking it around with her. Generic pop music starts to play around through some shots as they're moving, and before all this, you do get some panning shots of Courtney's trophies. She is a gymnast, and she must be a pretty high skilled one to have all these trophies. So they set up that she is trained in some form of physical activity. I did enjoy that. Generic pop music plays throughout some shots as they move, and then they start exploring the town for a quick second. So it's just for some more exposition, some character traits and growth. It shows that the town life, they're not used to town life and town friendliness, where everybody says hello to each other. So I quite enjoyed that. But after that brief scene, we we cut back to their house, and we're in the basement. We find Pat looking through some old JSA files, and I begin to realize he's been hunting the villains, or at least keeping tabs on them, and he's brought the family to Nebraska because this is where he's found the home of at least one of the villains. A brief scene with Courtney back upstairs. It's nighttime and she's staring out into space. She's upset, so she looks away from the stars, and we see a constellation light up for her. I guess it's the implication. So, kind of weird, but I guess. Then it's off to high school the very next day, where we get some typical high school scenes where Courtney feels out of place and she finds out that the gymnastics program of the high school was canceled between the last year and the current year, unfortunately, and she was really looking forward to that part at the very least, so kind of more insult to injury for her on that part. And she takes a bad photo, which I don't really see a high school girl allowing herself to take, but it's still funny, so why not? We cut back to Pat, though, and he's opening up his new garage. So he is a mechanic, so he is going to be working on cars and things of that nature. This is where we get to meet Crusher, a gym rat, but who wants to get Pat into his gym so they could start working him out. Of course, he doesn't have that big of a clientele in a small town. Tries to get every bit of person that he can, and he's trying to encourage Pat, trying to tell him that they could lift all these weights and really beef him up, things of that nature. After meeting Crusher, it's back to high school. Courtney gets it's lunchtime. Courtney gets told to sit at the losers table by the oldest looking teenager. I honestly thought she was a teacher at first. I don't mean that to be rude or anything. It just surprised me. And this is where we get to meet our bullies, who are at this point stereotypical jock bullies, but I much prefer stereotypical jock bullies to whatever type of bully Flash Thompson is supposed to be in the MCU Spider-Man movies. So I kind of felt like I was going back home seeing these beefy jock bullies who just tower over brisk passenger Courtney in stature. Although Courtney does fight back once things get a little too heated, and but she gets in trouble for it, unfortunately. So, not bad, not a bad scene, as I say. Stereotypical and kind of by the numbers, but I much prefer that to most things. Back at the house, they're having a family talk. We find out that her stepbrother had a pretty good day, and this just kind of, again, adds on top of her misery. After the family talk, Courtney gets upset, and for some reason, instead of going to her room, she goes down to the basement. I don't know if she had the purpose of wrecking some of Pat's stuff, but she goes down there. I kind of would have preferred if she felt the staff calling to her, or if it was more clear what reason she had for going downstairs instead of her room. Most teenagers I know typically go to their room when they're upset. But she does kick one of Pat's stuff, one of the boxes marked for Pat, so maybe it really was for her to just let off some steam. And she ends up finding some of Pat's old JSA files while she's down there and making a bit of a mess of things. They do establish that the JSA is well known throughout the people. When she reads the name Starman, there's clear understanding and recognition on her face. So I quite like that. The characters weren't just forgotten to time or anything like that over the course of 10 years. She actually has some knowledge of them, and she's able to recognize the hero names. It's at this point where the staff seems to get restless at her presence, and then she chooses to go after the staff, which is lighting up like a glow stick. She starts to inspect the staff, trying to get a closer look and stuff. The cosmic staff really comes to life at this point, and it begins to drag her outside, and the staff kind of like tests her, and she tests her ability with the staff, so there's kind of a mutual push and pull there that I quite liked. The staff is clearly alive. It has emotions. You see it giggle a few times throughout the show, and here in this scene where they're kind of pushing and pulling, you get the demonstration of the gymnastics training that Courtney has, which is, I find, also a good scene because it shows her skills outside of action, outside of fighting, and things of that nature. She just doesn't pick everything up right away. But again, with the staff having a mind of its own, it starts to drag her away to this drive-in theater where she sees the bullies being assholes again, ruining other people's times, and she decides to take the air out of the tires of one of their cars. But of course, the staff isn't really all that good for stealth because it's just this big glow stick, and she's spotted rather quickly. And we get a decent scene of the staff basically doing the fighting for her. It's holding off the guys. Of course, being this small little 5'2" girl, she can't really hold off 3 guys. And I quite like that as well. She hasn't mastered the staff in 10 minutes or anything of that nature. She's still kind of helpless, and the staff does most of the work there. After that fight scene, it's back to the house again, though, where Courtney tries to return the staff, but Pat has been waiting up for her. A brief scene involving a microwave has led him downstairs, and he's noticed that the staff is gone. Now, this point, I started to have a lot of fun with the show. I don't really want to spoil any of the parts during this, so I'm going to be skipping forward a bit. But I really did have quite a bit of fun with some of the scenes here, and I started to find myself decently invested in the characters. Skipping forward to the next scene I do want to talk about, and we're getting close to the end here, is the scene where they're on the porch. And we have some character development between Courtney and Pat, and it's I thought it was good. Definitely the writing was strongest here. The chemistry they have is quite fun to see. It's a scene where I actually had a few good laughs here, and yeah, she goes to bed. But the staff has other plans. It scares Courtney out of her bed, and yeah, and for some reason she's still fully dressed, but we can forgive that, I suppose. And we get one more scene, what that I would like to call a training scene before the end. And during this training scene, though, the training is cut short when Courtney is attacked by one of the villains from before, and she is frighteningly outclassed by this guy. She's not taking this guy on in a 1v1. It's only by the skin of her teeth that she manages to get out, and the episode essentially ends on a to be continued, which I wouldn't mind continuing. It was quite nice. I did enjoy it. Some stereotypical cliche stuff, but they're cliches and stereotypes that I don't mind, that I do enjoy. So I'm going to continue the series. If you have some thoughts of your own, go ahead and leave them down below. So my review comes to an end with this. I don't like a number rating system, so I'll just say this is a recommend from me, especially since the CW app is free to use, although with some commercial breaks here and there. But if you have access to DC Universe, you get access to what I think is a superior cut of the episode. So the DC Universe actually gets a highly recommended from me. So thank you guys for joining me on this review, and I'll see you guys next time. Enjoy the rest of your day.